Podcast, although this time we are with Rob Higham, who is a programme leader for the National Centre of Motorsports Engineering at the University of Bolton and also a PhD student. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks. How are you, Lyndsey?
Now, this meeting started this morning, but we've spent a bit of time chatting, so I had to check myself then and say good afternoon.
Yeah, just a little bit of time talking, yeah. Trying to fix all the world's problems, aren't we?
Do you think we've managed it?
No, absolutely not. Not yet.
Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me today. As you know, I'm talking to various different academics at the University of Bolton about their educational journey, and today it's your turn. So how was education for you?
It's interesting. I think we were talking before we started, so we'll make sure we fill the gaps. And education for me is was always something you just had to do. It was like a lot of people, I think you had to go to school, you had to try hard, you had to do this, that, and the other, and it was okay. It was without purpose, I think, is the core problem, and one of the things that I'm very passionate about. The reason I'm kind of looping back and kind of giving the end of the story up right at the beginning. The thing for me, the driver for education has to be to try and instill passion and purpose and help people understand why these things are important in education. Because without purpose, what is anything else? It's just plodding along every day. And for me, school was just something you had to do. Education after school, going in to do a college-based environment as an apprenticeship. So I was on day release in college. That was the day I had to go to college. There wasn't ever a real explanation or a motivation to do it. And that inspirational figure wasn't there then. And I think that's a relatively common story these days, I feel, in terms of the story why students do or don't come to university. What happened on their journey is motivation, inspiration. That's the person who they had is the reason they came, and also sometimes they never had that person, therefore they didn't have the purpose to come to a university, or they didn't know why, or they kind of just chose decisions following the crowd.
What was your inspiration then?
What was my inspiration? I think
all this traditional path.
So I was born and raised in a place which was aeronautical engineering. So I'm born and raised in Preston. For my sins, I have BAE Systems either side who make military aircraft, and I have a family history, I guess, in working at BAE. My school said, "Oh, you're doing okay at maths and science. You should go and be an engineer." No explanation about what an engineer was. You tell your family, you tell your grandma and granddad, they go, "Oh, good, you apply for that." And you applied, and you get the interview, and you pass the interview because you maybe naturally got enough of a gift or whatever words you want to use in maths and science to get the job. And I still remember that job process, that application process at 16. I didn't have a clue what I was doing. And then you get lumped into this job, and you're getting told you've got to train to do this. And even then, for the first year of that training, you're mixing with people, you're getting paid. Okay, this is new and different, but what's the point? And then all of a sudden you get put into a real position where you stood in front of a product. And for me, I wasn't ever overly inspired by cars or planes as a kid. I'm quite happy not staring at them. I wasn't really obsessed like some people are. And then all of a sudden, stood in front of this aircraft, engines fire on, ear defenders on, and this deafening noise. And that, for me, one of those kind of moments where I think by this probably 17, I'm looking at this aircraft and it takes off in front of me. I'm 20 meters away from this aircraft, and then he comes and loops back and he hovers it in front of me, a Harrier jump jet, and I'm just gawping, and I go like, whoa. And that point for me was where someone was like, how the hell can I do anything to do with that? What is it I need to do? What is it I need to learn? And that really is the core of my motivation. Actually, I accidentally fell into a career that I was inspired at after I started, which is the wrong way around.
Yeah, that's interesting. So thinking about school then, you had sort of no aspirations to go into this industry at all. It was just getting...
Not really. I think in school I enjoyed making things. I enjoyed fixing things. If you invited my mum in, which I hope you don't, she will tell you about all the things I'd left broken in the house because I started to get intrigued by how things worked. But I don't really know where that came from, to be really honest. I'm not sure what started that. It was an interest, intrigue. I got offered a job at BAE. I also got offered a job as a joiner because I like making things. And I wish I could remember his name. I remember where his little plot was, and that was an apprenticeship as a joiner. So I did the interview after I had the job offer from BAE. And I remember the guy telling me at the end, he said, "No, is this your only option?" And I told him the other option. And he said, "Okay, I'm not offering you a job. No way am I going to take someone who's been offered a job at BAE as an engineer to come and be a joiner. You're above this," and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay. And he was the first person who really told me openly, "You should go and try and do this as a career." And I look back and I, like I say, a little 16-year-old Rob, I wish I could whisper in his ear that was some really good advice. And my mum was really positive. You do whatever you want to do, whatever makes you happy type thing, which is a really nice attitude to have. But ultimately, I needed a push, and it was this guy in a place on Essex Street in Preston, which I hope is still going, who told me, "You will go and be an engineer." Only because of the prestige of BAE, not because of anything else. And yeah, so I definitely looked in. It's a bit of a fluke for me. If I was born 50 miles away and there was no BAE either side of my town or city, who knows what would have been. It's very strange. And yeah, it was just an intrigue in how things were made, and that was kind of it. I was the only person in my family to go into engineering. It's definitely a fluke, and maybe that's one of my drivers. Is actually I didn't get given the advice I needed at the right age, and I've looked out. And I love engineering. I love problem solving. I love everything that engineers do. But back then I didn't know that, and I think that's probably one of my drivers to teach engineering and to try and help people understand the benefits of engineering is to try and be that face to inspire, dare I say inspire, or at least give students that application, that purpose, and think about what that could be. And that comment students is for any age. For me, that really needs to start much earlier than the day they start at university.
Yeah. It's bringing back so many memories talking to you. My granddad used to work for British Aerospace on Strand Road. Do you remember when the Strand site was there?
Yeah.
And you're right, because I grew up in the same area you did. All the boys went to BAE on Strand Road, but then the girls went across the road to the factory where they learned how to sew, and they did an awful lot of sewing. That's where my grandma worked. And I remember
my grandma did as well.
Yeah, it was the culture, wasn't it? Girls went to the factory and boys went to British Aerospace.
It's very strange. Yeah, so they just British Aerospace on Strand Road had just been knocked down, I think, when I was starting. But I started on the training centre, which was round the corner.
Right.
I mean, I think I was probably just on the right side of luck, but it's a geographical luck, and some of the students who come to the university in a fast track in a few years, they come from all over the country, and if you haven't got industry on your doorstep, planes flying over Preston for us as kids was relatively normal. You wouldn't, you'd look up at the sky as something moves across the sky really fast and loud, but ultimately that became normal. And if you're near a really large automotive manufacturer or locomotive manufacturer or whatever the thing is, you become accustomed to the noise, and maybe that motivates you a little bit. Maybe you find it intriguing. But if you're away from a product, if you're away from a thing, a purpose, school is good for subjects, and you need those subjects, no doubt. But how many people have ever asked, what do you need trig for anyway? Pythagoras, I'll never use this. Okay. Only every day of your life as an engineer will you probably need to use those things. But why don't your maths teachers tell you that? Why don't your science teachers show you that? Why don't you get close to a product? And it's the responsibility of universities, I really feel, and industry, to make sure that those products are visible to students. And that's selfishly talking about engineering, but that's, within any product, there's more than just engineering. There's huge waves of information that need to be gathered. There's going to be everything from law to finance. Business makes them all go round. So that's what we have, I believe, as a university and as a and as an industrialist, I like to class myself as an industrialist. That's my purpose, is to try and give people that application, and give people that visibility of a product, whatever that product would be, so that you don't have to then plod through your life and just follow like little sheep to university, because that's where your friends are going for a nice life and a happy little chore for education is fun. Learning is fun, and whether that's an intrigue as to what's that, how does that work, or whether it's why is this old castle here, what's a castle for, whatever motivates you to want to learn. Everyone likes some form of learning, and if you catch it at the right point, if you can get that instilled, then that can be your drive, and that can be a career. You can make a career out of anything. The world is more open than ever before. We're here on a virtual call. Okay, we're only a few miles away, but I could be in Beijing, I could be in Brisbane, and we could still have the same conversations in a way which you couldn't when I was a lad. And that makes the world more accessible. So more than ever before, information is at our fingertips, and we're always learning. So hopefully, I'm one of many people trying to do my little bit at getting people to understand that you can make a career out of whatever you want to learn about.
So long as you want to learn.
Yeah, I know some people will say, I never really liked learning. I'm not sure I can really agree, because everyone wants to learn. They might not want to learn what school's telling you. You might not think you want to learn, but you're still watching videos on YouTube about X, Y, and Z. You're still practicing whatever the thing is that floats your boat. Whether you're building things in your garden, or whether you're practicing your, anything, exercise, business, finances. Everyone wants to learn something. It's just whether school subjects, the traditional subjects, whether you want to learn those or not. And again, the purpose of learning is for application. It's to try and do it on a thing. And school doesn't really do that for the most part. And hopefully that is changing. And if it isn't, then we certainly need to do our bit to change that.
So you are a 17-year-old lad at British Aerospace. You've just been this fighter jet pilot. I don't plane. I'm rubbish with some I don't know what to call it. What happens next? How long did you stay there?
Not very long, because again, no, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to turn this podcast into some kind of weird mystic meg thing. But fate is a strange thing, and I do believe in fate. And this was around the time of 9/11. So it was a very turbulent time in the world. People wouldn't buy military aircraft because our threat was all of a sudden wasn't army. It wasn't army versus army. It was a different type of threat, and the world went into a strange spin. They put all education, if you like, on hold. So basically, we were told you have to sit on the shop floor and wait for an engineering career to happen, and it might take a few years. After just being inspired by this jump jet, at that point, there was no way that I wanted to just sit on the shop floor. I finally, the penny had dropped for me. Finally, my motivation was there, and they wanted to take that away from me or ask me to wait. One of my biggest, depends on who you ask, my wife will tell you one of my biggest failings. I think my internal careers advisor will say one of my biggest positives is I will make decisions based on what I think is best at that point from my own motivation. I'm very much kind of self-aware, and I've always had that in me in some way, and I knew it wasn't right to stay and wait. So my motivation would have waned, and instantly did, I guess. So this turbulent world was when I decided to leave, and I spent some time doing, I don't know, growing up, I guess. I was a 17, just about to say an 18-year-old kid when I left BAE, knew that I wanted to do something, looked at university and was thinking, well, what else interests me? Is it just aircraft? And I started to look at that, what the university world was, and I didn't really understand, and it wasn't quite right for me. So at that point, I could have followed the semi-traditional path in terms of age and gone to university, because I'd done my college as part of my apprenticeship, and potentially would have had an advantage over my peers because I would have had some experience alongside it. Not that those years of experience really mattered, because I didn't understand what I was doing. There was no purpose behind it. I was just doing a job. And I think I spent a couple of years, I quite often call it soul searching, where I was just thinking about what is this world? What do I want to do here? Then I went into the automotive industry, and that was again, it was because of how do these things go together. And I did a lot of my job at BE was actually focused on electronics and the development and the manufacturing of electronic systems for aircraft. So I went to become basically an electronics focused mechanic. I was doing a very simple maintenance and diagnostics of electrical faults in cars, and that was interesting for a while. And what that did do, again, that was another apprenticeship, but that did give me another world to look in, and that was because of problem solving. So in my role as a motorsport engineering lecturer, we get huge quantities of people who are former mechanics or trained mechanics at level 3 from college who want to come and be an engineer. And I would be a hypocrite to say that's not the right pathway, because I kind of did the same. I did aeronautical engineering first, then I went and did this kind of mechanics role. And what I loved about that side was finding faults. So if the car is doing this, what's the problem? And finding faults and finding problems is now, fast forwarding several years, I know that that's the core of engineering, is finding faults and finding ways to fix them. I didn't ever get bored of fixing the faults, but I certainly got sick of not having any say in what the fix was, because what you find with diagnostics in cars is you find the fault and you replace the part, and then you just become a part of the sausage machine. It's always which bit broke, change it, and it was never actually about finding out why it broke. So again, now I'm 20-ish year old Rob, and now all of a sudden, so I've been inspired by a product, I liked how things work, and then all of a sudden I've liked problem solving, and now I'm asking, well, why is it broke? And that is a very important question that students should ask on an engineering degree. So it was only really at that stage, 2 and a bit years late, versus the traditional pathway into university, that I decided, well, actually, I want to go and find out everything that happens in the background of these things to know why these things go about. And that was then, again, timing-wise, was at a time where we had the big economic crisis, and there was a lot of jobs being made redundant. So I took voluntary redundancy so that people who had mortgages and children could stay and have a job. And I wanted to try something else. So that's when I went and I studied motorsport engineering at university, because that was the point for me where I was ready. So I was classed as a mature student at that point, even though I was only a couple, 2.5, 3 years older than my peers. But I needed that time personally to know what was the purpose of going to university, and that was a big thing for me.
Yeah, it's, I think we're sometimes pushed, aren't we, at that age to go to university. And if you don't know what you want to do, it just seems like not just a waste of time, because like you say, education, you learn every day. Education is important, but I know I didn't take the traditional route. I didn't go from college to university. I don't think I could have done it. And I've come back into education late, and I think it's absolutely right. You do sometimes need that life experience, or just different path to I can really resonate with what you're saying, to find and feel what you want to do. I kind of fell into my career, if I'm honest, and I always wanted to be a police officer, until I didn't. And it's only when I've kind of left the police and come to university and I realised, oh my gosh, this absolutely is my passion. So listening to how you talk, I think you're absolutely right. We don't have necessarily that inspiration when we're younger, or through education when you're in school, to see what you want to be when you grow up.
And we're all different, aren't we? So there's some people who are, and the people I went to school with, and I did a bit of Facebook stalking before coming on here today, because I wanted to see if this thought was about true. And I remember there's a few people who I very pally with in school, and they were, one of them was obsessed with maths. He was amazing. He performed exemplary in everything in maths. And while the rest of us were struggling and we were fighting our ways to C's and B's, it was really easy, natural for him. But I remember at the time his dad worked in banking, and he has gone down a similar route. So he's been surrounded by numbers all his life. So that subject for him was what he was going to go and do. And then there's other people I know who were unbelievably talented in some of the more practical things. We did a resistant materials BTEC or GCSE, whichever one it was, BTEC I think it was, and that was making things. Well, actually, a couple of the people who were very, very good in that subject, they've gone on to do maintenance or manufacturing roles. But they found those subjects, and they have a somewhat logical pathway into a career. But then there's also a large number of people who did okay at school. I think you'd find that they would meet all the acceptance criteria for most college courses. But what's the point in going to college for no purpose? If you've not found a subject which you're motivated for, then the chances are that you don't know the combination of those things will equal a career. So our pathways are different because it took us longer, I guess, is the way to put it, longer for us to figure out what the thing was and how to get there. Positive with what our educational system in this country is, there are lots of avenues to go down, and it isn't a one-size-fits-all system. That is getting better as well. So the avenues into higher education or further education are plentiful, and the understanding that people come from different backgrounds is certainly getting better, but it is still not quite right, because we need to be grabbing it early, and we need to try and inspire people to want to study those subjects. I don't know if you're the same. I'll put words into your mouth, but quite often have a small regret at not trying harder at certain subjects that would have helped you in your career now, but you didn't know you needed them at the time. You didn't know you needed to focus on. For me, it was physics at school. I struggled with physics at school, which is crazy to be an engineer. Struggling with physics. That's because I could picture it. I quite enjoy chemistry because I could picture it, because we used to set things on fire and we dyed things, and you do all of the silly stuff you do in chemistry, and makes you think that that's what chemistry is. And if you can't picture it, which I think is, and the reason I bring it up is a lot of my students will comment on, I need to be able to picture it to understand it. So I think that's the world we live in. I think I'm probably just of that borderline age where technology was starting around me. I had PCs and phones were coming in. I did have a pager in school, which is not quite the same. Not that anyone ever used a pager really anyway, but that technology wave was coming. So I can understand, I hope I can understand enough about this modern technology-driven world where information is available, which wasn't before. But at the same time, I think that traditional just do okay at school type thing is there, and somewhere in between that, using technology to inspire and having all of this information to make sure that people at a very young age understand what's the purpose of these things like education. It's got to be more than just a mandatory education stamp. It has to be for purpose for me. And we've got big problems trying to fix that.
It's the practical application, isn't it? Like, I keep reflecting back on what you're saying now, thinking about me going through school. I didn't fit into those traditional subjects. I hated maths. I was all right at English. Science, no. It depended whether it was comedy or not. If we were talking about willies in biology or something, it depended whether I was interested or not. But looking at where I am now, I mean, I've done a psychology degree and I'm doing a psychology PhD. There was nothing psychological within my high school education. I mean, there was going on to A levels and onwards, but nothing ever kind of piqued my interest in school. Whereas knowing me now and my mindset, that would have absolutely floated my boat.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. I was very bored in school. Nothing really interested me. I did all right at PE. I was all right in certain subjects. I was one of your average middle of the road kind of students, really. But yeah, the application of that knowledge and how it fits into your future is absolutely key. Absolutely key. I wonder if I'd have had that, if my path would have been very different.
Yeah, no, I quite often reflect on the same. If someone would have come in an early stage of school before you make your choices, maybe, and say, well, if you choose subjects X, Y, and Z, these are the type of careers you could have, and here's the person stood over there in your sports hall today with a little banner up waving. That's the person who's going to tell you what that job's like, and getting to speak to people and witness people who are doing jobs using those subjects, that would have helped. And I'm sure I would have said it loads of times doing homework. Pythagoras, when do you need to use this? And actually, someone should have answered that question for me. Really, maybe I should give my mum a telling off, and she could have tried to help me. But the reality is, the career services have to try and do that, and subject specific stuff.
I'm sitting here listening to you now, and as I said earlier, I've got a son, and I'm thinking, gosh, yeah, you're right. Fractions and all this kind of nonsense with maths, because I was terrible at maths. I can barely do my son's maths. But listening to what you say and how you talk about it, my son loves picking things apart and putting them back together. That's why maths is important. And now I can have a conversation with him about that. Whereas, prior to us discussing this, I would never have put maths and engineering together. I know it might sound crazy, but I didn't know. And this is what should be being taught to children. Yeah. How does, you're sitting in maths bored out your skull, but actually in the future, if you want to do something along this lines, it's that simple kind of explanation as to how it all fits in. It's a big jigsaw puzzle.
I absolutely agree. And I don't want to complain about key process indicators and bore anyone who is listening or watching. But as a university, we're really keen to make sure that our graduates get jobs, because that's the next point in the chain. I will probably be doing some people a bit of a harsh comment here, but in school, your KPIs are pass marks and maybe on continuing studies at FE, which I think is mostly enforced now. So then colleges, where you're forced to take students because that's kind of the norm. Your core deliverables as a KPI, the thing that you're measured on is how many students go to university. That's not right. The end goal is what happens after university, and that's the job bit. And we're expected as university staff to make sure that we then take all of these potentially independent subjects, we then amalgamate them together, we inspire, we give application, we give purpose, we give experience, we give careers advice. That, before you even teach any of the subjects, is a 3-year process. And actually what we really do need to do is make sure that students are as inspired as possible by industry and understand the application of all of these different things. I'll obviously talk about maths and science for engineering, but ultimately, there is always going to be other things in there. The ability to speak different languages is really important in modern engineering. Your artistic ability could potentially be there if you want to get involved in design. IT, depending on GCSE subjects, are becoming more vast these days. You can do a lot more than you could when I was at school. So having engineering at GCSE is an interesting opportunity for those who are able to get it. And then looking at, I've not done too much data digging, but our students, some of the students who know about engineering from an early age, they're very motivated, passionate, intrigued, and they will work hard on the course to make sure they do that. Those students who have come because they have an interest in motorsport, if that interest is strong, they're motivated by motorsport, so therefore they'll try. They maybe haven't got the background to pick it up really quick, but they've got that motivation and work ethic to do it. And then unfortunately in kind of the modern world, we still have quite a lot of students coming to us who weren't inspired or motivated before they got to us, and they, we do our best to make sure that they get the best chances possible, but quite a few of them don't actually want to be an engineer. They're just interested by motorsport, or they're interested by the product, and it's almost too late for some students for them to backtrack and try and backfill all of that knowledge that they've missed because they weren't given the chance to explore the subjects and the combinations of them. So it's a very difficult world, I think, we're in the school into education. That's the negative side. There is also a positive side, and I think the purpose of one of the reasons I wanted to talk when you offered, Lyndsey, is actually, isn't it interesting that you don't need to have these subject geniuses who go and do school, and then they ace school, then they go to college and they do all the traditional subjects, then they go to a red brick university, get a degree, then a PhD, and they are then the holy grail of teaching. You don't need that, because what you actually need is to be able to get access to people who've got different backgrounds, because that variability is important, and that's what we've tried to do at Bolton generally, I think, across all subjects. And it's worth shouting about is there is a nice mix of people with good industrial experience. I like to think of myself as a modern lecturer, in that I've got more industrial experience than I have educational experience, and I think that's important. But I also need to make sure that within our team we've got the nice mix of industrialists, and then some of the, not necessarily the traditional academics. It's about being able to educate at any age and put the information across, and that's the common theme that you should find in all educators, is the motivator is in instilling knowledge in others. That's the passion. And it just so happens that for us in motorsport, all the staff have a connection, experience, and or motivation to teach engineering, because we still want to be involved in the subjects. And it's important to remember that all academic staff are here because we want to make sure that as a student you have a future in that area. And we've not come here because it's easy. We've definitely not come here because we've finished doing the hard work in the industry, want to wind down. Those kind of common misconceptions, you've got to be passionate about helping people get to their career path, and I'm really proud of our motorsport team in that. That's our common agenda item, if you like. It's about making sure that students come to us and have the opportunities that we probably didn't have at university. And then the next big thing that we need to do as a university is we've got to make sure that we can help people in colleges, in schools, and try and in whatever way possible give them that visibility of why maths and science is important. The STEM agenda, as everyone's heard of STEM, I don't know if everyone really understands what it's trying to do, because I think there's not a clear one size fits all solution here. But yeah, trying to get, as you just said, your son understanding why fractions are important. Well, if we can create an environment where we can help demonstrate that, and again, the motivational factor is the student will do the work, whatever age that student is, they'll do the work which is created to give them this end purpose, and it will give them an output, and that output they can hopefully then be proud and motivated by, because we all want to see the end product. We don't bake because we enjoy mixing flour and sugar and yeast and water. We bake because we want the bread,
the cake,
or whichever way you want to do it. And that's what we've got to have. At the end, everything we try and do normally is because we want the output.
Yeah. It's so interesting listening to you talk. I've got a family member who is very passionate about women in STEM technology. She STEM subjects, I say. She is so passionate. She got her PhD in psychology, but she worked for IBM, and one of the biggest problems was for her that she found was the communication between sort of engineers and academics, and the lack of female voices within those processes too, because it seems very inaccessible for women and girls. And I think that's something else that needs to be kind of pushed forward, is to know that if I was a young girl doing really well at maths, for example, then it's a potential career for me too. And it opening the doors for anybody rather than it just being really specific.
Absolutely, and I totally agree. And it's always a bit awkward because I am male, so it's always an awkward conversation for me to talk about how important it is to get women into engineering, because I'm not a woman in engineering. But my former life, my kind of industrial life, I've spent a huge part of my career at Airbus, developing parts for commercial flight, and some of the best engineers I worked with were female. Some of the other best were male. But what was always common was there was a mixed team. And you're a psychologist, Lyndsey, you'll be able to tell us all about this maybe on a separate podcast, but the blend of different personalities, and in particular having different genders, it allows for an appropriate mix of perception, thought, style. Everything is covered. And I've got some really good friends who are still at Airbus, and they're female engineers, and they are the ones that I would call if I had an issue, because they, whether it's just down to them individually, whether they were male or female, I have no idea. I don't understand the psychology of people, but they're the most methodical, they're the most open-minded people, and in all cases they are no ego, no messing about. It's all about making sure that they help get the solution ready, and they were always a dream to work with, and even now as an academic, they're the people I go to try and get them to help my students, because not just as an inspirational factor, right? It's not about a token gesture of having women engineers talk about women in engineering, but they're the best ones I've ever worked with, and that's why, yeah, the Me Too bit you just said is dead right. Having somebody say this is what I did, this is my path. If it just resonates with one people somewhere to go, yeah, well, that's what I've been doing, and that's all it needs to be. And the stigmas around engineering, in particular engineering and women engineering, are certainly moving slowly. But again, I think if you did a straw poll across the whole population demographic in this country and ask them questions about engineers, they would assume dirt, mess, male-orientated environments, etc. And there's still a big, I don't want to use the word problem, I'm not sure what other word there is, but there's still a misconception about engineers, and I'm sure for a lot of other industries as well.
Of course, absolutely. Well, we've talked about it. Just going back, I mean, I don't class myself as particularly old, but I remember going to Strand Road with my granddad, and just like I said, the boys went to the engineering, the women went to learn how to sew, and that's within my lifetime. It's not too long ago. There is that divide, but I think it's really important to listen to what you have to say. Although we have jumped quite a bit. So you're at university, studying, and now you're all these years later at Bolton. So what's the middle bit?
So I think because I was a couple of years older, I naturally took up a Uncle Rob type thing, and they that little bit of life experience probably just meant that I was a little bit more organised. Maybe I've been used to getting up and working, therefore my mentality was slightly different towards university. I was still as much of a clown as everybody else on certain occasions. I still made mistakes like everybody does at university, but I think I just had enough life experience about me to understand why I was there, and just that I had that little bit of purpose to be there because I'd found something. I think I helped a couple of my friends, and I always remember day one of university, look around you, these are your friends for life, and it's true. So the people I studied with all those years ago were still very close friends, and I hopefully helped them a little bit, just with a little bit of purpose and motivation to try a bit harder than maybe they would have. But I also always enjoyed helping people. I remember one assignment which was a real tough one. It was a thermodynamics assignment, and I remember thinking to myself, if I can crack this first, I can help everyone. And that's bonkers thinking back as why that was my motivation, but it was. I don't know where it came from, but I did. I cracked the code, if you like. I figured out what was needed to be done, and then I remember we spent a few nights in one of the 24-hour access IT rooms with whiteboard pens, and I was explaining what I'd figured out, and we all did okay on the assignment. We all passed, but I remember that being a real motivator for me, and I think that had happened before that point. My time in the automotive industry, I loved telling people what I'd found, and I think that, I don't know whether it was just to do with a personality trait that I just quite like telling people what I'd found, whether it was the show off in me, whether it was something else, I'm not sure, but that was always there. So for me, going straight from university into education was an option. I did have those conversations, and I was given, again, I've been fortunate at the right positions in my life. I was given some advice which has turned out to be correct. And one of my tutors at university, he told me to go and get leave university and go get some industrial experience. And that was a no-brainer, because that was why I went to university, and I liked helping people. But what the reason I went to university was to then go and try and make an impact in an industry, and that's what I did. And again, going into industry from there, that little bit of wanting to help people was always in there. So you're doing the job, but you're still then trying to give something back. And I think that's become common. I was just talking before about STEM, and I think industry these days is very good at making sure that you do your bit to help schools and colleges with whatever it is. So I went from university to work for Airbus. I did industrial placement in the UK, and then I went industrial placement in Germany, and then I went back and finished my degree with a funded, sponsored dissertation. And I was very fortunate that I got that kind of opportunity. And I went back to Airbus on the grad scheme, and I went through the grad scheme, and et cetera, but all the way through all of that point, from internship through to when I eventually left Airbus to come back into education and come to the university. All of that period, I was, again, trying to help people around me, whether it was colleagues or whether it was doing the STEM stuff. We even did a thing called number partners, and we used to go to primary schools and help kids with maths. We didn't need to be there. We weren't better at maths than their maths teachers, but it was a different face. It was a different approach. It was bringing cardboard cutouts of planes and getting them to help multiply them together, and all of these different things. It was just taking different angles, and I think credit to Airbus looking back now, that they really tried the best in the local area to have a big impact. It comes back to that geography point that I mentioned before. If you're not in that geographical catchment area, you don't get that impact. And industry is pretty good in this country. We're in a very strange time with everything going on, but industry generally is everywhere. But it also, you're relying on these very, very large industrial giants who earn obscene amounts of money and have lots and lots of staff to go and inspire all of these children from primary school all the way through to college, and that's an onerous task, and it isn't really just for industry to do. And there's a lot of people who then aren't getting that inspiration, and that's where things need to change, I guess. I can't remember what you started with that question though. Then, to be honest, I just so I fast track forward. So that was the university, and then that was my kind of industrial experience. So most of my time was trying to fix problems, because that was a bit I liked. And then on the side, whenever there was an opportunity to help people, then you try and help people, whether that was primary school children, whether it was helping apprentices and grads who'd started after I'd started. That was always something that was instilled in us, I think, from our management team. They were very much about a supportive network where you help each other. So again, I had a little bit of something in me which I knew I liked to help people, but again, I worked for a company that promoted that. That was a positive trait. They wanted that, because they saw the need for STEM. They saw the need for inspiration of girls into engineering. They saw all of those things, all of those problems they tried to tackle head on, and I'm sure they had some success in the catchment area to do that. Then we're in this big wide world, everything's accessible, so now we need to start to shift the change, and everyone who is involved in engineering, everyone who has that buzz in their belly with helping people, everyone who has that interest in fractions of trig or whatever the thing is, that's up to us now. We can all communicate with each other, and we can all help each other see that purpose, and we're all as guilty as everyone else that we don't do enough of that, because it isn't the core. It's not the core of our world, is it, to help other people?
No,
and that's not our day job, and there's not many people who are fortunate enough to have a day job whose only part is to help people. So yeah, there's that was the kind of core buzz that took me to want to think about education. That same tutor who told me to go to industry, he was also the person I spoke to when I first found an opportunity in education, and he told me that I was bonkers to think about going into it, and that I should explore the world as an engineer because I was doing pretty well. So again, all I've needed at the right time was a little push in the right direction. I've been very fortunate. I have been very fortunate. I've had just at least one person to ask that question to. Going forward, my job, or one of my core deliverables that I put on myself, is to try and be that person for other people. So as long as they can find me, then that's what I'll do. And I've been trying to do that with, connecting to everything from children in care through to for different kind of special educational provisions, and to try and help, again, only within the catchment area of the university, I guess, but trying to give them all a position to come and talk to us, giving them a face to ask questions to if they need to. So that's kind of what I'm motivated by in terms of not necessarily helping people, but definitely answering questions which I wish I had answered.
So, how did you end up on your PhD route? How's that happened?
I love the what if question. I have this conversation loads in a normal week, and my job at Airbus was in materials and processes, and that was because I was obsessed with what ifs, and that was one of the places where you get to explore that. So what would happen if the heat treatment oven didn't work properly and they didn't get to a certain point of a heat treatment cycle? What would happen if? And getting data and testing hypothesis just became the norm for me. I'm very strange in that's one of my kind of most exciting things that I could possibly get my hands on is a what if question. And I'm also very process driven, and I want to be able to apply normal processes to it, because that's another boring side that you get in engineers. So then the PhD side for me, this topic that I'm studying has been a what if in my head since I was working professionally, and I just never got the chance to explore it. Coming to university, I wasn't sure whether I was old enough and ugly enough to be a lecturer. I thought I was far too young and good looking. But I want to help people. I want to motivate people to succeed in their careers. And I had the opportunity to then do my what if study alongside my day job. So for me, it was almost a no-brainer to be given the opportunity. Spent a couple of years trying to figure out what the hell goes on this side of the table, if you like, in a university, and coming up with the best methods and trying them to find ways to motivate students, finding ways to give them the application, creating courses, etc. And then it was the time was right for me to start to then ask my own what if questions, and that was the core of why I want to do a PhD. That's the core of why I am doing a PhD. Is it's a very selfish what would happen if question. So again, I think I've now in my position in terms of academia, I'm talking to undergrads and postgrad students and prospective researchers, I guess, in terms of their PhDs, and that's what I always tell them is, have you got something that you want to know the answer to? And if you want to know the answer to it, has anybody answered it for you? And if not, then what an amazing experience to go and find out the answers, go and explore the answers. As I'm saying it, I feel like it sounds like I'm being really dull, because but that is the bit that really floats my boat. So I'm studying, researching, a additive manufacturing or 3D printing based metals issue. Without turning this into another 4 hours conversation about metal 3D printing, which is another thing which definitely floats my boat, we have these really cool ways of manufacturing things now where we can use lasers and electron beams to melt powder. And we're in a position where these machines have got more and more complex over the years, and we now have multi-laser systems. So there's a big pot of powder which is coated onto a plate, and then with these lasers and electron beams, multiple lasers quite often these days, they are melting this powder bed, then the bed drops and more powder comes on, and we can then create a three-dimensional part layer by layer. It sounds really quite advanced. The reality is it's the same as we've been printing things for God knows how many decades. We just put ink on a paper. If we kept putting ink on, and we kept putting the same paper back in, and we kept building it up, the paper will get thicker. The layers are very thin. The metal layers are a bit thicker. It takes ages. There's lots of layers, but ultimately it isn't beyond the realms of imagination to picture how this works. I always have a example on my desk. So 3D printed parts, they are metal, and you won't probably be able to see the camera, but there's lots and lots of layers which are just a fraction of a millimeter high, and they build up and build up and build up to make a part. So this is a titanium part. So my question, my hypothesis, my what if is, what would happen if we have these multi-laser systems with lots of lasers, what happens where the two lasers come together? Is it like the Ghostbusters, where if the lasers join together, the world will implode until we find out at the end of Ghostbusters 1 that when the lasers join together, we managed to kill the baddie? Or is there a real problem in this multi-laser 3D printing world where actually the material doesn't get melted properly? Or is it over melted and therefore we have evaporation of things? So I'm exploring and researching what happens in these intersections. I'm expecting a call at any point today to find out what the build, the 3D print build, the first one is complete, to find out whether it was a build success, which is good. And then I'm going to research and do some testing to find out the answer to what happens on these zones. I'm sure my colleagues would wince at me keep talking about 3D printed metal, so I might leave it there. But ultimately, that's what motivates me to do a PhD, and that's the comment I leave to my students as well, who are finishing postgrad or who are starting postgrad and starting to think about next steps. Is if you've got that question, then research is an amazing opportunity. If you haven't got that question, then you'll get it eventually. Go into industry, find the question, and then give me a shout and we'll come back and find the answer. And that's for me is a big purpose of doing a PhD in an engineering subject, I would say.
Yeah, it's really important that you have the question and the interest in the area, isn't it? I know from others that I've spoken to, it's that renewed interest. Otherwise, it's such a long journey that you just, for want of a better phrase, get bored of it. It's hard to keep motivated.
Absolutely, and that's the same for undergrad dissertations as well. You know, it's not a very long project in the grand scheme of things. And in particular, again, selfishly towards engineering, I tell my undergrads all the time that you've got way longer than you have to do this type of project than you would in industry. You have to deliver way less than you have to in industry, but you get the opportunity to really focus your energy on one area, and that's the first opportunity you probably get at any part of your educational journey to specialize in any way, shape, or form. And if you're not choosing a subject which is going to help you get up on a cold, damp, rainy morning in halls in Bolton to then come into university and do some testing or do some work on whatever the equipment is, then you've got the wrong subject. And again, that can only be chosen by having access to products, having access to the application of it. So yes, very much the focus of our job at the NCME at any level to give as much application as we can. And that should hopefully inspire you to then find something to have a look at, specialising and answer some what ifs at. And then, building on that, the staff will always have our own what ifs, and we'll ask the question and we'll set the questions, if you like, for students at undergrad and postgrad and PhD level to go and explore them on our behalf, if you like, as well, because we can't help ourselves, I guess. And when you've got the bug for asking the question, then you'll never stop.
Yeah. So what's next for you then?
So I certainly need to get a PhD. I'm in the process of writing some new courses. Again, it's something else I really enjoy. I enjoy the challenge of thinking about creating an educational program that meets the requirements of industry, but takes the input of the modern student, if you like, in terms of what happens with colleges and schools. So that's a big part at the minute, as well as trying to find ways in which we can do more as an educational establishment to help. I guess it's from GCSE decision time to understand why you might choose engineering as a GCSE if your school does that. Why you might choose one of the technology subjects if your school does that, or at least to have an idea of why you need to sit in that maths lesson, why your physics lesson is important, and if likewise it's also as important. And I think people sometimes find this quite strange that I say this, but it's almost as important to motivate students as it is to demotivate them. Because if you're blindly focused on studying maths and physics because you quite like the subjects, but actually no one's told you why you would use them, then that's a really good position for me to come in and I can tell you how you'd use them, and that gives you hopefully an extra jump in your step. likewise, if you still have no idea about subjects, but a member of your family is an engineer, you also need to know a bit more about engineering at university in real life as well. And if that puts you off, then all I'm doing is I'm putting you off making a poor decision. I'm not putting you off education. I'm just trying to help you on your journey as well. And that's a big part of what we're trying to do. And one of my main focuses going into the summer, as we're almost at the end of term, so we start to look at what's next for us to try and work on a bit more intense, is how do I help inform people who are making decisions about engineering. Hopefully that helps me inform them to come to us, but hopefully I also have managed to help clarify it for those who are maybe thinking about engineering but would be better suited in in another world where they can picture themselves. At the same time, I don't really know how we could potentially go about doing all of those things at the same time, except for this type of forum is really good. Get to talk, get to see the person, and then obviously all of the traditional university upper hood days, open days, etc. are really good. There's got to be more than that. So our outreach will hopefully have a bit of a pathway created during the summer to try and help schools and colleges on that journey for themselves as well.
Yeah, that's certainly needed. So any final words from you? Anything else that you think people should know about you, or anything that you would change?
There's all kinds of change. But at the same time, as I mentioned before, I think things have felt quite well for me accidentally, and I have been fortunate. So I would say my advice, I guess, for any potential university student or even at a younger school age is just do what makes you happy and keep doing it, because there's so much pressures in the world to be a certain type of person, do a certain type of thing, and family pressures and geographical pressures. In my case, I felt lucky, but yeah, just enjoy what you do, because life is short and your career is shorter, and take your time. The second piece of advice, I guess, is don't rush education. Don't feel like you have to go to college, then university, and follow this well-trodden path. If you feel it necessary to go and spend a couple of years out, then do that. If you'd rather not go to college and you want to get an apprenticeship and you therefore don't get your traditional A-level qualifications, do that, because as a university, we want a variety of students. We want a variety of backgrounds. It enriches the educational environment around all of our students. So, yeah, do what makes you happy and don't worry about the well-trodden path. And then the final thing is talk to people. Just as a university, we're pretty good at responding. My email address is plastered all over our website. So if you have any questions for me, then feel free to email over, and hopefully it will help you picture yourself as a future engineer, or if it puts you right off, but helps you clarify where you want to be, then that's also fine. I think there's a lot to be said for just choosing what makes you happy and finding a career in it. I think if I would have spoken that way to 16-year-old Rob, the only thing I actually wanted to do at school, the only job I knew, was archaeology, because I was a dinosaur freak. And maybe I would have gone and been an archaeologist, but I doubt it. And so I don't think there's any regrets or anything I would have changed. Just be happy. Life is way too short to not just find something that floats your boat. And I've got lumps of 3D printed titanium on my desk because that's what floats my boat. And I hope that that's the ringing message, is just find a path and just enjoy it, because that's what it's all about.
Good. Yeah, you did it. Thank you very much.